Morning, Gamecock fans. Today is Tuesday, June 17th, the year of our Lord 2025, and this is Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Glad that you all are joining me today to talk a little Gamecock football, recruiting, all the topics we get into here on Coffee. It's an honor and a privilege to sit here and talk to you each and every day. Quick reminder, no coffee Thursday, Friday, Monday. I'm traveling to Columbia with the wife for the third annual Wing Off. You are all invited. It will be from 4 to 8 p.m. at CB 18 Bar and Grill in the Five Points District of Columbia. That's Steve Tannehill and Cox by 90's Bar. It's a good time. It's the third straight year we've done this in various forms. Second straight year at CB 18. It's a free event, but if you get on X and follow our links, the Big Spur 247, Cox by 90, Cocky Hospitality, and you RSVP, you get a free raffle ticket. So it'll be a fun time. We'll have a dunk tank, live music, wing eating contest. It'll be a blast. But this is going to kind of be my vacation time. Chief Sports, our live shows, inside the Gamecock shows, will be off, from next Friday through the start of SEC Media Days, whatever date that is. I think the 14th. So it's our annual summer hiatus. We do that because Phil, the Mad Dog, needs a break and a vacation with his family, first and foremost. We take one over Christmas as well. Helps us to recharge, reformat, get ready for season 4 of Inside the Gamecocks. It's hard to believe it's been 4 years since we started all of that. But, this is episode, I think, 104 of Coffee, which just started this calendar year back in January. So we're rocking and rolling now. Final official visit weekend of the year for South Carolina this weekend. Very critical visits for a lot of different players. The two defensive backs, Samari Matthews and Tamarian Watkins, are sort of on my radar personally. Those are big visits. Competition is thick. I had someone on the bigspur.com yesterday talking about, this is the way it should be. Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks need to, or should be, if you want to win, targeting a lot of blue chip talent, and they have been. This is a high percentage. And what comes with that, though, is these are dogfights against some of the very best programs in the country that absolutely have signed a ton of great players through the years. And so this is just how it's going to be. And I think the idea is to get your share. Some would sting worse than others to lose. Some would feel a little bit better than others to get. It kind of depends on you and your own personal love of recruiting or love of prospect or whatever. I think it's good that different people kind of gravitate towards different recruits and all that. It's very healthy because I wouldn't be able to sit there and talk to you about this if you didn't care. So that's always a good thing. And it kind of has moved into the transfer portal a little bit. Now, I say this every year. There'll be a player, because it happens to me, that departs the program in the transfer portal that at some point in time, if not at the moment, you had a great feeling about being good for the Gamecocks. And that sucks for the fans in a lot of ways, but it's a positive that the players and that you take the time to even formulate an opinion on it. I think that's very healthy and it creates more knowledgeable fans. Not that you have to know all the players to be a good fan. It's not a good fan, bad fan. It's knowledgeable or whatever. I think sometimes the rankings create unrealistic expectations right away, and patience is not something that any of us, carry a bunch of when it comes to college football. But it is something else, the way the interest is with all of this. And when you're in on a bunch of players that a lot of the great schools from around the country are in on, they're going to be dogfights. You're going to win some and lose some. But that's the idea. And I think it shows in a lot of ways, how the program has evolved There's been some big moments on the field that have translated to being able to attract under Shane Beamer some of these players off the field. And fans, you guys out there, you guys and gals that show up and fill up Williams-Brice. I mean, I'll give you a great example. I'll take you back to 2023, the Kentucky game. That team was 2-6 heading into a homestand and struggled with Jacksonville State. Thank you, Stone Blanton, for that pick six. Beat Vandy pretty good, a very depleted Vanderbilt team at the time. And then had Kentucky coming in. Kentucky was a bowl team. Remember, they played Clemson in the Gator Bowl that year and should have beaten Clemson and beat Louisville the next week at their place. So that was a pretty good Kentucky team. And that team in 2023 is beat up and thin as it was and young as it was. Spencer Rattler, Xavier Legette, they pulled it off 17-14. So that was the Darude game. That team was 4-6 heading into the game. It was Kentucky, which is not always a big draw. It was a night game, and the place was packed, and it was an outstanding atmosphere. So how did that help this staff recruit and lay groundwork for some of these guys they're in on now? Yeah, quite a bit, folks, quite a bit. So give yourselves a hand, too. Justin King, the Emmy Award-winning Justin King, he needs to give himself a hand as well, because the atmosphere at Williams-Brice Stadium now is gone to the next level. It's always been great, but now it's just such an event. I mean, the stadium kind of comes alive. I mean, it's pretty awesome what they've done. So everybody's a part of this, right, to be able to attract these players. But you got to close the deal, and we know that there's a ton of factors at play when it comes to players picking schools these days. There's a lot of talk, you can't avoid it, about NIL. What's the House settlement going to do to impact some of these wild stories you hear about money? By the way, on that note, the Lenora Sellers thing is accurate as far as what his dad said. Of course, it's his dad, so he's not going to sit there and lie. But I do think that the 8 million headline is a little misleading, because people think $8 million a year, and you're like, wow, it's not a year. It was a 2-year deal, $4 million a year. And of course, Sellers, it's probably a good thing for Carolina if he's not back next year, because that means he's had a great year and can go to the NFL. And Bruce Feldman mentioned that he's mocked in the top 5 for the NFL draft. But that is dependent on him having a good season. And so if he does, it probably means South Carolina's going to win some games, because, you got Superman at quarterback, but if you got a bunch of duds around him, I mean, we've seen it before. It's not going to be the best year, right? So we'll see sort of what happens with Lenora Sellers this season. But I can tell you that those numbers are accurate. There are a lot of boosters out there chirping behind the scenes about getting them. That's what led to some of the social media panic, because there were rogue people. Oh, rah, 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 rah. Yeah, I remember a YouTube commenter, I think from Auburn. He's going to go to Auburn, and I got a call from a buddy of mine that's an Alabama guy, but his neighbor's a big Auburn guy, and they were talking it up, and I'm not saying Auburn definitely did the 8 million. I don't have concrete evidence on that. And for those that say tampering, I'll explain this real quick. Because the state of Tennessee and the state of Virginia sued the NCAA to allow negotiations between collectives and players or whatever. The way you get around is the collective actually talks, to the agent or whatever. It's plausible deniability. No, but it's there's not, as long as you don't directly, as long as Hugh Freeze didn't pick up the phone and call Lenoris or his family, it's unfortunately not something until they get a federal law in place that is legal. I mean, and the courts decided that. So there you go with that. But that's we know there's a lot of factors at play. But just to be clear, when it comes to recruiting, NIL, all that's a crazy world we live in. But Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks, Darren Usher and the whole staff, they've set themselves up pretty good, sitting on 8 commits. So there's a long runway and a lot of delta there to fill it up and to move up in the 24/7 sports rankings. I know they're higher on 3. I guess their formula is different than the formula that they created when they had 24/7, right? So we'll see what happens. But 24/7 is based on a bell curve. So the higher rated guys you get, the more the class will move up. And so we'll see what happens. One of the big keys to this class this year, and everybody's glad to see it, is South Carolina kind of getting back in good shape in North Carolina for prospects. This has been one of those things through the years that, frankly, has been a topic of discussion. Why doesn't South Carolina do better, more consistently in the state of North Carolina? You know, Clemson does. They've, and maybe it's part of that's because they're in the ACC and there's probably a little more familiarity there. And obviously they win, and it's close to North Carolina as well. You know, it's not as close to the talent pockets, but right down I-85, you know, Clemson's probably they're closer to a bigger talent pocket in Georgia than North Carolina, but they've always done well there. They don't always go up there and get players, but they've been pretty successful through the years in the old North State. South Carolina's gotten players here and there. It kind of comes in waves. Spurrier had a big North Carolina class back in 07 with a lot of good players, including Travian Robertson, who's the defensive line coach. Under Beamer, it's been, you know, Will Muschamp and those guys, they would go pick off some guys. Like Eric Douglas was a North Carolina guy who was there a long time. He's in coaching now, by the way, and I think that's great for him. Jovan Gwynn on the offensive line, Jalen Nichols on the O-line. They would go up there and get O-linemen, and had a few here and there. Beamer coming in, though, at the time, you know, you had Mac Brown at North Carolina, and then, you know, from what I was told, you know, by some staffers, is that, you know, those kids, to get them to not stay in state, and NC State was there too, and they got Jonathan Paylor and some other guys with a staff that's been there for forever, and so they all have these long relationships. It's going to take time, you know, and then the blue blood kids. And they're a mess of them every single year. I mean, there's guys in North Carolina, South Carolina doesn't even, you know, that end up. There was one, Elijah Littlejohn, that committed to Penn State yesterday. I think Carolina offered him and had him on campus for a while, but he was long gone. You know, Tennessee's been over there, you know, making some noise. But it's a big enough state to where there's more players to go around, and it's right there. So it's taken Beamer some time up there, and that is with a North Carolina native in Clayton White, North Carolina native and Travian Robertson, a guy that played at NC State, and Sterling Lucas. I mean, you know, Torian Gray, who recruited the state for Virginia Tech. I mean, it's been, I guess, a wall they've had to kind of chip away at and break down. You know, so it's been sporadic. And I can use a quote from Winston Churchill that he said on October 1st, 1939 about Russia. He said, Russia is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma, and thus is true with the Gamecocks recruiting in North Carolina. The good thing Beamer and staff have done, they've kind of gone around it, you know, because when you're at South Carolina, you know, you definitely have South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida to a certain extent. Used to be a lot bigger for the Gamecocks, but you know, those 4 states, it's all within a 4 or 5 hour drive of Columbia, and there's a ton of talent. So you have to, you know, you want to recruit that. The state of North Carolina, the last 10 years, has produced 96 NFL draft picks. South Carolina 49. That's almost double But it's almost double, more than double the population. I mean, North Carolina's closing in on a population of 12 million. It is a vast state geographically, much bigger geographically than the diamond-shaped Palmetto State, if you will. But it's always been a place, and some of the greats have come from North Carolina. Don't get me wrong. Anthony Wright was from North Carolina in my lifetime. Todd Ellis, Brad Edwards was from North Carolina. I mentioned Travian Robertson. Melvin Ingram is from North Carolina. Chris Culliver, North Carolina guy that they won some battles for. That was all in the same class. Pharaoh Cooper, more recently. There have been a lot of North Carolina players. They've gotten some from the transfer portal too. Jawarn Howell was from Mooresville, North Carolina. And Torricelli Simpkins was from the Charlotte area. And the other thing is Charlotte. I mean, it's right up the road. Columbia is the next town down. You already have a big Gamecock presence in Rock Hill and Fort Mill. It's essentially a suburb of the Charlotte area. And so it's just, there's this weird thing, like the border somehow between Rock Hill and Charlotte. Carowinds, the Carowinds paradox. We call it the Carowinds paradox. Anyway, was Thunder Road on the same side as South Carolina side of Carowinds? I don't know. But the Carowinds paradox takes place. And for some reason, Carolina had a lot of success there. And Charlotte is a big Tar Heel town. I mean, it's a big banking hub, and we know all about that place. But, dare to dream, and like I said, Beamer's done a good job working around it, hitting places, like D.C., Maryland, the state of Virginia. So they've been fine. I mean, they've done well in Georgia. They've been fine without it. But at some point, you knew they would probably try to make a move, and that time is now. How about now? And dare to dream a bit if the Gamecocks can establish a foothold in the state of North Carolina and pick off 3 to 5 a year of good quality players, plus keep doing the work in the other states. It gives you a nice little Carolina's nucleus. Plus, it's D-line heaven. North and South Carolina D-line heaven. Very low bust rate with defensive linemen in that area. But this kind of got started quietly last year with a class of 2025. Brian Rowe, who, by the way, go check out a clip on our YouTube channel from the Late Night Gamecock show where they talk about the Brian Rowe ultimate Frisbee jump that was on the Gamecock Football Instagram account. But great googly moogly. That, wow. What a catch that was. But Eastern North Carolina, Concord area, and they got him in early last year. Tayshawn Austin is another one from kind of the central part of the state. And then they went to old Havelock. Corey Robinson's another guy from North Carolina I didn't mention, from the Spurrier area, offensive tackle, and got Donovan Darden, and his stock went high the whole time. So that's 3 good ones. So then you start laying the groundwork for this cycle. And, the more you can get out of this state, the better. And there is a bunch of them. Already 2 committed. The Harris twins. Aiden Harris, a top 50 defensive tackle. Andrew Harris, a top 400 4-star outside linebacker. They're twins from Weddington High in Matthews. And then this weekend, you got a guy in Samari Matthews from Cornelius Huff. Huff is a factory for players right outside the Charlotte area. They've been recruiting Samari. I call him Smoke for a long, long time. Torian Gray has a good relationship there. We talked about NIL earlier. We'll see how much that is a factor, but it's South Carolina, Texas, Miami. He's a really good player. We talked about him yesterday. Big official visit for the Gamecocks this weekend, and he would be quite a pull from that state. I like him. I really like him on film. Pierre Dean is a player that kind of from up the Winston-Salem way. Obviously, Georgia, Ohio State are the other 2 there. His brother Jared Wilson played at Georgia, but South Carolina's right there in the mix. Started out as an O-line prospect, now as a D-line prospect, D-tackle, D-line heaven. And so there's another option, option number three, Noah Clark. He's from up there in the Research Triangle, Durham, Jordan. Top 250 player per composite, number 126 overall per 24/7 Sports. 6'4", 330, D tackle. Everybody wants D tackles, right? D line heaven. And it's a great year up there, by the way. And, if you start thinking, if you get the two out of that state at that position, which is, South Carolina hasn't, they need to replenish numbers as far as high school defensive tackle recruiting is concerned. They're going to have to hit the portal at this position for the foreseeable future because you still lose guys and you can't rely on freshmen. And hey, maybe Gabriel Brownlow Dindy has a fantastic year and goes to the draft again. That would be a positive thing. But they're going to have to hit the portal for a while at D tackle. And they've been good at doing it. I mean, Carolina brought in Goodwine and DeAndre Jules in the previous cycle, and this year you've got Gabriel Brownlow Dindy, who I mentioned. Also, you got a JUCO transfer, Xavier Hardy. Yeah, I like it. Devontae Miles from Bowling Green is going to play a factor this year. So I think that. I think that's good. There's been a track record there, but certainly you want to replenish the high school ranks. Losing Amari Adams to Clemson was probably the toughest ones because he's a South Florence guy. Nick Eason did a really good job with him from Clemson, and they got him. But that's the way the ball bounces. That's the way the cookie crumbles when you got Clemson in your state. That's just going to happen, and Carolina's really done a good job of getting more than their share. You don't have to divide the state up with Clemson. They go out of state enough to where they pass on a lot of good players still within South Carolina. So, but Noah Clark, very huge, huge target. Some would say, and this is not my opinion necessarily, but there are some out there that this is their guy, Noah Clark. I think here's looking at you, Clint, our Nana's Porch Chat Boxing recruiting guru on the Inside the Gamecocks to show. And I don't know that for sure, but I bet if we asked Clint, he would probably say Noah Clark, the most wanted thing. A big offensive tackle, JB Shabazz, also from up there close to Pierre Dean. He's 6'7", 295. Crystal ball still in on him, but man, golly. Tennessee, Penn State, Ohio State. I mean, I don't know. I think the Buckeyes and Gamecocks would probably end up doing battle there. It's just probably going to depend on proximity to home. So we'll see what old JB does. He visited earlier in the cycle. And then from Greensboro, Grimsley, another tall, lanky corner, Kosey Barnes. He's not a blue chip prospect, but he's a high upside guy. So I just rattled off, 7 people, including the 2 commits from North Carolina. Gamecocks can end up with 3 or 4, and you pile that on top of Rowe, who, by the way, is going to be really good at South Carolina, and Darden, who, by the way, is going to be really good, and Austin, who I have a lot of hopes for, maybe special teams guy this year. That's a good start. I think that sometimes recruiting is contagious, and I don't know that South Carolina gets Dylan Stewart, for example, out of DC, if it weren't for Nick Harbor, and if they get Carter Meadows, another DC top prospect in DC, defensive end, 6'6", 230, which I don't know, that one's kind of an enigma, if you will. I think South Carolina's in good shape. I just don't know. There's Penn State, all these other schools are in it for him. Penn State's kind of the home team, but yeah, I mean, I don't think they're in it with him if it weren't for Dylan Stewart and Nick Harbor and Big Tree and the Maryland guys and people that are familiar with the District of Columbia know this. Maryland, the part of Virginia that DC is Nova. They call it Nova, and that's Arlington, Alexandria, all those places, Fairfax County, if you will, Loudoun County. But then there's other parts of Virginia like 757, Richmond, sometimes Roanoke and Lynchburg will have a player down towards Virginia Tech. But it's a bigger state, right? It's like the difference between Eastern North Carolina and Charlotte and the Triangle and Asheville and all that. But Maryland's all compacted in there. So chances are Maryland is more DC, if that makes sense. Uh, as far as recruiting goes. In fact, it rivals back in the day. We used to just combine DC and Maryland. The University of Maryland is inside the Beltway, if I'm not mistaken, College Park. So it's basically the District of Columbia. You just go to DC and you're University of Maryland. The outside of DC part of Maryland is beautiful, by the way. Love it up there. Anywho, so sometimes in recruiting, guys go and Charlotte's an area like that, and if you get Samari Matthews, the other parts of North Carolina haven't always been good to Carolina. The US 74 corridor going from Charlotte Concord, oh yeah, Anson County, Rockingham, where Melvin Ingram's from, Scotland, where Travian Robertson's from, where Ronaldo Balkman went to prep school or something before he came to South Carolina, former Gamecock basketball player, first round pick with the Knicks. That's been good. Lumberton, Hutch Eckerson came from there. All the way over towards the east is good. Eastern North Carolina, when South Carolina gets up there. I mean, you do have Nick Barrett, by the way, from Goldsboro in Eastern North Carolina, who is another defensive tackle. Signed with Beamer in his first class. Muschamp got him committed. He's going to probably have a good year. So there's another D-line heaven guy right there. So South Carolina's had more success there. And in Charlotte, the Triangle, you got Wesley Saunders back in the day. We were just talking about him on the Big Spur yesterday. It's sad what happened to that guy. Man, it was unfair that he ended up, what happened to him happened. Chris Culliver's from up that way. You have some baseball guys. Landon Powell, obviously, I think is from that part. Ray Tanner's from the Triangle outside of Raleigh. So it's it hasn't always been as good because you got a lot of schools around there. It's closer to other places, that type of thing. Winston-Salem, I think the Stadnick twins came from that area, kind of. And then who else? Oh, Mike Wyman was from Greensboro, I think. One of the Greensboro schools. He didn't last long. JT Surratt was from Winston-Salem. It's interesting because Brad Lawing evaluated JT Surratt, and Wake Forest is right there in his hometown, and pretty good evaluating school, right? They didn't want him. He ended up being Carolina's best defensive tackle for a while, so that was interesting. But the point is that this is a bit of a last frontier when you talk about the expansion of the footprint north to south, Miami to Maine, so to speak, and Carolina picks off some guys in Pennsylvania, and they'll probably at some point get a kid from New Jersey, New York, whatever. And when you talk about the footprint, this is the one state that you look at and the numbers have not been there, and it's for the reasons I outlined earlier. But if you can close the deal, South Carolina can close the deal on some of these guys, even if they get the Harris twins and two more, I think combining it with the three you're chipping away. And there's no reason right now with, Bill Belichick at North Carolina, NC State. I don't know how they feel about Dorn. And you got transition. Wake Forest and Duke aren't going to normally beat Carolina on anybody, but you got some transition up there and some teams that haven't been great. And then, Virginia Tech is not really a factor in North Carolina anymore. Virginia never really was. You're basically battling the big dogs or some kid that wants to stay in state. And that could end up being Noah Clark, because from what we've been told, he wants to stay close to home. He visited Virginia Tech this past weekend, by the way, had a good visit. So the Hokies are a factor with Noah Clark. But I still feel good about where South Carolina's at. So yeah, North Carolina, the old North State, this is an opportunity to again kick in a door and establish those all important inroads in recruiting and build relationships in case some of these guys get in the portal, right? That kind of thing. And with Charlotte right there with access to the Eastern, They say all the time, the University of South Carolina is closer than Chapel Hill to Charlotte, and it's in the SEC. It's closest SEC school to most of the points in the state. When you get over in the mountains, Tennessee's obviously closer, but Carolina has that advantage. All right, don't forget John Strickland on Talking Ball later today. Phil and I'll be back with Inside the Game, another zany episode of Inside the Gamecocks show. It's Terrible Tuesday, the worst day of the week, with the exception of tacos. I'm going to go get on 107.5 The Game with Wild Bill Gunner and Preston Thorne, and enjoy myself this morning. Hope you enjoyed coffee, folks. This is JC Shurburtt signing off. Don't forget the wing off. Holla at you soon.